It's not that deep. Everything love, lust, and life.
Sex. We talk about it so you can get better at it. We can all get better at it and maybe feel a bit happier in the process. It's not that deep. Or is it? Hi and welcome to this episode of Sex Is Not That Deep. I'm Fran, I'm here with my husband Andy and my friend Rebecca, and today we're talking about open relationships. Is it a closed book? And when we first talked about this, Andy and I, we thought we weren't in an open relationship, and then we read the definition. So I think the definition is probably the key one for you to get out for us.
Yeah, so an open relationship means having more than one romantic or sexual partner at a time. It's an arrangement that both parties agree is non-exclusive or non-monogamous. As one or both partners engage in romantic or sexual activities outside the relationship, the arrangement's agreement aspect is key. So it's different to polyamory, which is, it's a fine line between the two. But polyamory is where each spouse in the primary relationship also has long-term sexual and emotional relationships with more than one partner, all of whom know each other and are generally on amicable terms. If your relationship is polyamorous and closed, then you have more than one partner but have agreed not to take any new ones. It's a bit of a minefield, but I think basically if it's an open relationship, it's more...
Because when we talked about it, we were thinking that all open relationships were more like polyamory, where there was some sort of emotion involved. Whereas for us, I mean, it's all sexual, and apparently that makes us open, but we didn't think we were. So that's the main sort of question for today, isn't it? You know, is it a closed book? I don't think it is, because we are technically in an open relationship, but we don't feel like we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have described it as that. I think it's a phrase, isn't it? Open relationship that feels quite new. It's quite new to our language that we use, and I suppose because of that, you have quite closed views of what it means. And for me, yeah, an open relationship was inclusive of emotional aspect of it as well. But
yeah, and for us, I think that's where the boundary for us is as well, and what we do.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be interested in the emotional side of it, are we, with anyone else and involving someone else in that? No. That's obviously where polyamory comes into it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's having that emotional commitment and like almost having multiple boyfriends or girlfriends or husbands or wives or whatever. So
I can see the attraction of it, but that just seems hard.
Like hard enough having one.
Yeah.
I think the logistics of it, it's just a nightmare.
I mean, we're busy enough.
Yeah.
Just as us. To add other people in would just complicate things too much, I think.
Why do you think people are interested in it?
So I think polyamory has an attraction in that it's a whole lot of love, and I think, isn't it? Because you've got more people in the relationship, there's a lot more emotions going on, and I think a lot of people who enter that kind of relationship, maybe one's not enough, or maybe it's just that you have a lot of love to give, and that you've got more people to give it to. I think also it might also be things that people sort of fall into. They're not looking for. They just end up in.
Do you think maybe it takes a bit of pressure off a relationship if it's not closed? If it's like more free and open, I guess there's less pressure for perfection and there's less pressure to that whole, you're cheating on me. All of that drama isn't there, I guess, when it's like, oh yeah, we are having extramarital relationships, but that's...
Yeah, I think it breaks down a lot of the boundaries, doesn't it? A lot of people are very... This is the box that we have to live in. And once you break free of that box, life's a lot more free. It's a lot simpler in many ways.
Yeah.
And maybe polyamory actually is simpler. I don't know, having not been involved in it. But maybe it's actually, I'm free to have feelings here and indulge those feelings, but also to have feelings here as well, and not label it.
So I guess if you guys are in an open sexual relationship, would you say that sort of ever any anxieties around trust and that aren't there because your agreement is that it's fine to be with different partners?
We've got boundaries with it, I think, and they're quite...
Yeah, I think we've got fairly reserved boundaries, not in the sense of where we're scared of trying new things or anything, but I think we're really happy with each other and comfortable with each other, and therefore just adding in that element of a bit of diversity with sex is quite a comfortable thing for us. And I know for lots of people that wouldn't necessarily be the case, and some people have maybe got more stringent boundaries and some people a lot less. And I think it's important to say that in terms of polyamory, we can only sort of speculate on it because we're not in that.
Yeah,
we're not in that place. But I do think that you talked about a minute ago that people maybe go into it because it maybe is a little bit easier in some respects, and it maybe does take away jealousy, temptation, and other things that might otherwise be a negative impact on a relationship. You know, and I know firsthand, I've seen, not up close, but somebody who I've known in the past who was in a polyamorous relationship, and I think it worked really well for them for quite a long time, for them and their partner and the other person involved. And whilst I think in the end it ended up playing out not in a particularly positive light, and I think it all sort of unravelled in the end. But I could definitely see how, you know, you like you said, you're multiplying the love and the feelings in a relationship. I can understand how people can fall into a place where they're attracted to that idea.
I think that relationship started as a sexual relationship, though, and as soon as one of them got pregnant, it became a completely different kind of relationship, and morphing from one to the other is hard.
Yeah.
I know a lot of polyamorous relationships are actually almost based around a family kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite an extended family where our mums look after the kids in a very sort of fluid environment. And so for us, that kind of going from that sort of family type relationship to a polyamorous relationship probably wouldn't be that different. Where you've got, it's a sort of nurturing environment, and you've got children from each mother. And that sort of fluid kind of, it's almost like a tribal thing from way back when, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can understand that more than I can understand the sexual one, because I just think from a love point of view, that's where our boundaries are. We've got quite tight boundaries on that. You know, we are us, and the people that we have sex with are them emotionally.
Would you say for you guys then the open relationship aspect is more for,
it's physical,
it's more
for
sexual excitement and like spicing up your sex life more than it is spicing up your relationship?
Yeah, which is why we think that we thought that we weren't in an open relationship, because to us that's a separate thing. That's swinging, really, isn't it? Rather than an open relationship. For me, my definition, which obviously isn't the same as the actual definition, was a sort of love, emotional involvement kind of thing, and that's very different.
Yeah, I think it's clear for us that where we've decided we want to do that is that it's just a dopamine hit. It's an in the moment thing. That moment might last a couple of hours, but you know, it's a in the moment thing, and then kind of when it's done, it's done. That doesn't mean that our experience and us sort of enjoying that doesn't last, you know, because the high from that, the buzz can last into the next day. It can last a few days. You know, we might be more intimate immediately after we've involved other people, and this is something you hear a lot from people who are into swinging or people who go to sex clubs, is that in fact it's pretty unanimous. People we've spoken to, couples that have said, yeah, the next morning or the next day we feel so much closer because we've involved other people the day before. Just
feels like coming home.
Yeah.
To have it
and the next day, you just feel a lot closer to each other.
Yeah.
And it just shows it does sort of heighten your relationship.
But then that's, I think, why we have quite strict boundaries on that, because that's a thing that we kind of use to enhance our relationship with each other. Whereas I think polyamory is another thing altogether, and that's a kind of breaking down the boundaries of the relationship, and that relationship's sort of fluid and with other people.
Well, to add someone else in, you've got to deconstruct what you've already got, haven't you? If you just literally throwing somebody in the mix for an hour, you haven't got to change anything. But for something much more rigid and polyamorous, you've got to deconstruct everything you've already got to fit someone else into that equation.
You find that with groups of friends, don't you? We have groups of friends who have completely non-sexual, but you have groups of friends who have very, very sort of low boundaries with each other. They go around each other's houses all the time, and the relationship sort of as a group, especially if they've got kids and things. And we've always found that really alien, because we're really insular with each other, and maybe that's why we are sort of on an emotional level as well. We're quite insular, and we're quite okay with each other and no one else, sort of thing.
So if we look at the stats of how many people are in, it's called consensual non-monogamy, or CNM relationships. 1 in 5 adults in the US is part of a consensual open relationship. Respondents who are male, gay, lesbian, bisexual make up the majority of individuals who've engaged in open relationships, and less than 1% of couples are in open marriages. So there's like different stats to the open marriage aspect to there is the open relationship, I guess, because probably people who go from open relationships probably start off, or a lot of the time would start off in them saying, I don't like to be monogamous, I like having multiple relations. Whereas I would guess with marriage, it's something that comes on later and is like, actually, I think we should, do you know what I mean? Introduce something.
I think also interesting you're saying about gay and lesbian relationships. I think there, you're already not in a box by virtue of being gay. You're not in the original box that life sort of draws for you. And you've also become sort of, I think it's much more of a community thing generally. And so you're already sort of part way into exploring that.
Yeah.
I think that makes you more open to it. I think we are much more closed naturally as hetero couples and as people in general. And I don't know whether it's a positive thing or not. It may not be. I think it probably isn't.
I think it depends. 76% of open bisexual marriages are either better than average or outstanding. So there's like promising elements for, like I said, like you just said about not being in a box. In a Canadian study, the age group most into CNM was young adults, and monogamous and CNM Canadians registered the same degree of relationship satisfaction. But compared with the monogamous couples, those with partners equally into CNM reported significantly greater couple satisfaction. So
I think it's done us.
I can imagine it would take off that, particularly for people who struggle with it, like jealousy or struggle with trust things. It would take off that pressure if it was all a bit of a free-for-all.
I think you have to master those things before you get to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're creating problems.
Yeah.
And I think there are so many relationships that have real trust issues. And we see that, don't we, as well, when there's a lot of relationships where they're going out and going to have sex with other couples, and then you can see they start doing things and they're like, actually, no, we're not. But you don't know where those boundaries are until you get to them.
Yeah.
But you can see them sitting there in the moment going, yeah, we're not actually okay with this, or one of us is okay and the other one's definitely not feeling it.
I can imagine that is quite a lot of conflict then for the couple.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people just walk out in the middle of things,
Really?
and they're just like, no,
I'm
done.
We've had conversations with people. We went to a sex club once, and there was another couple there, and they didn't engage in anything. They just sort of spent the night observing and that, and we had a good chat with them at the night, and they were just saying that we're still not sure if it's for us. I think this was probably their second visit at that point, and they'd spent 2 visits to this place, and just watched and I think chatted between them about, do we want to do this or not? And I think it was
that conversation's important though, isn't it?
I think it's good that they were kind of made that leap of, let's actually go to the place, let's see what happens, let's immerse ourselves in it, and then make a decision
and see how we feel. Yeah.
And I don't know, the last time we'd seen them and spoken to them, I don't think we're sure where they wanted to go with it and if they wanted to do it or not. But I think it was good that they put themselves literally in it and saw it, and you can make a really educated decision, okay?
So many things with sex, people have an opinion, and then that's their opinion forever.
Yeah.
And it's not based on any kind of experience or knowledge, really. It's just, this is my opinion and this is me forever.
Yeah.
And I think that's really damning for a relationship, because you're just coming from this rigid point of view. And if you meet someone else with a rigid point of view, there's going to be something where you've got to compromise.
That stubbornness creating the sort
and that
of
ability
conflict.
to change actually has made our relationship better, hasn't it?
It has. And I was thinking about this a minute ago, that we made the decision to, from a sex point of view, to put ourselves in positions where we can involve other people if we want to. But we made that decision over a decade into our relationship. I just wonder if one of us would have sort of proposed it earlier on in the relationship, would we have embraced it as much? Would we have enjoyed it as much? Do you think we'd have got the enhancement that our relationships had as a result of it earlier on?
Or maybe we'd have come further and have more fun. I don't know.
It's hard. It's just a hindsight thing, isn't it?
But that goes to show that just physically experiencing things
in your relationship makes all the difference.
Makes a big difference, yeah. And you can't really know what you're going to feel about things from the outside until you dive in a little bit.
And that's what we did dive in, because our first visit. There's loads of resources, and we've kind of realised this after the fact, but there's loads of places and groups online and communities where you can get loads of information around sex clubs and what happens, what you do, what's expected of you. And we were really naive in it. We didn't bother doing any of that. We just literally decided on a whim, let's go at the weekend.
And turned up.
And we turned up completely blind to it. And with hindsight,
And
there's
late.
loads of information. Well, of course, we were late for everything. But there's literally everything. We didn't have a clue what was going on. But it gave us that opportunity to throw ourselves in the deep end and see. And I wouldn't recommend that for everyone because there's so much information.
Yeah. But like Fran said, you guys have been together for ages, and you have that level of communication, I think, that allows you to be able to do things like that. And even if you came away from it and it wasn't for you, you'd be able to communicate that. And I think that's so essential.
I could really understand, especially if you have something that's either part of your emotional needs or part of your sexual needs, the other person can't or isn't interested in servicing. It's a fundamental problem in your relationship, but the rest of the relationship's really nice and stable. That to add that in with another person that you both are aware of and happy with, I could see that being a real positive, especially if it's something sexual, because that's a simple sort of physical need sort of fulfilled, and that's not cheating. There was I was reading something about this sort of thing on one of the groups that I was in, and they were saying, oh yeah, if they're willing to do that and look outside the relationship, then it's cheating. Or if they like this thing that you don't like, they've got to suppress it. And I was thinking that's really unhealthy in a relationship. And if that's fundamentally part of who you are, being able to talk about it and accept it and then move forward with that and create an avenue for that to be a positive thing, that can only be a good thing in a relationship.
Yeah.
As long as you get jealousy and insecurities out of the way, I think. This is always one of these things where jealousy is like the killer of this kind of situation.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if we look at swinging, which is sort of more in the category of what you guys do, the stats there are quite positive. So they report happier marriages, express more non-sexual affection, consider their sex more satisfying, like you guys said about the sort of the morning after sex, enjoy more marital communication, praise their primary partners more, express less jealousy, are about as likely to say that swinging strengthened their marriages as that it contributed to their divorces. So there's quite a similarity in that. And are no more likely than the general population to suffer anxiety, depression, and other mental health problems. So do you think that resonates with you guys?
Definitely. Yeah. I think of couples that we've chatted to that are involved in it, and almost unanimous people say it's brilliant. We wish we'd done it sooner. We get a real positive kick out of it, both during and after. And I think it has a wider ranging benefit.
Well, it's made us more confident.
As people
in general. Yeah. I mean, we had a wobble initially because there is a bit of a learning curve, and there is definitely, you have to be quite a confident person to get anywhere with it, because you are literally dating people for a night.
Yeah. So
you've got to get everything over in one go. So you've got to be really forward with it. And when we first started, we weren't. And we thought, oh, the problem's us. And it was, but it's not in the way that we thought. We thought, oh, I had a real wobble thinking, oh, I'm not attractive enough. This isn't going to work, sort of thing. But actually, it's nothing to do with that. It's about how you deal with people and your social skills. They do. I think
the real important skill to it is to realise in your head, everybody is there for the same reason. Mm. If you go to a regular nightclub, some people might be out there looking to pull and to find somebody to spend the night with. Some people might be there looking to find a long-term partner, and some people just want a night out.
Yeah.
You don't know, you can't read. It's not like...
such a good point.
It's like a computer game where people have got a little avatar above the head saying this is what they're into and this is what they want to do. You've got to try and read people. At least when you go to a swinging club, everyone's there for the same reason. It's not a taboo subject to talk about it from the off.
No, and again, it gets your communication skills going, which is always better in a relationship. I think this is where also with polyamory, communication absolutely would be the key, wouldn't it? Because there's no way it's going to work if you aren't good communicators between two of you. There's no way it's going to work with more people and more opinions being put in the pot.
So much work. So interestingly about swinging, the spouse in the driver's seat of swinging is usually a woman. And in addition, women are prominent in the management of many US swing clubs. So that was really interesting. And the females
That's
lead
our
the way.
experience. The women are the ones who decide.
I don't
what's
think
going
that
on.
you would think that as somebody who hasn't done any swinging or doesn't really know much about that field. I don't think that I would assume that women were the leaders in that, but I think when we've had conversations in podcasts before where it turns out that women have a lot of these a lot of things that they repress sexually, that they want to say and they want to do things their way more, but they don't feel confident enough to.
I think I'm thinking of things not necessarily that we've done ourselves, but things I've seen in that space is that the women do hold the power, as I see it, because, you know, if you're in a respectful relationship with your partner, then, you know, it's a gentlemanly thing to say, are you comfortable with that? Are you happy to get involved in this? And vice versa, of course. But even I think if you are, if your trait is to be submissive, you know, I've the last time we went there, we weren't involved in it at all, but there was a lady there who, you know, had a number of men around her. And her kick was that she wanted to be used. She wanted to be that centre of attention and be used. But absolutely 100%, she was in control of it. She was making all the decisions, and all of the men, for all of their dominance and that, in the moment, I suppose, kink in her mind of, yeah, I'm in control, I'm part of this, and, you know, I'm the dominant force here. You weren't. If she's put a finger up and says stop, you would stop him in.
That's what they say, though, isn't it? That the sub is actually the dom.
Yeah.
But that those roles are there to make them people feel a certain way. But actually, the one who's the sub has the final say.
That's generally. I mean, this in the moment situation, you choose to be submissive, for example, but you're still controlling that situation, and it is a controlled environment. It's not an uncontrolled environment. Everyone understands the rules and what needs to happen, and that no means no, crucially. But also, you say about the management of it. You know, yeah, it is the places we go. It is the females that are involved in the management,
more
the
visible
running of the
as
place.
well.
They're more visible, but also they've got a grip of it. It does seem.
This, what you were just saying there, just made me realise. You ask me if I'm okay in situations, especially early on. I've never asked you. I've just assumed that if you're not okay, that you would pipe up, because I feel like you're the more confident person to pipe up with that.
You can't use the word pipe up when you're talking about swinging. That
But
does sound odd.
But I've always assumed that you're okay, and I've never asked you, and I've just realised that's probably a failing on my part.
Maybe you shouldn't. Have
If we look at polygamy again, many cultures actually have legal polygamy as well as prostitution. In fact, most of the patriarchs and kings of the Hebrew Bible had multiple wives and concubines, as was customary of ancient Middle Eastern cultures, just like we were saying before about the sort of tribal aspect and how it was like a community effort to bring up a family and things like that. And that is historically something that has been a big part of culture and history. And if we look at the sort of the sciencey side, a cross-species analysis suggests that fathering only evolves when there is monogamy due to paternity certainty. So it seems that humans have evolved in a more monogamous direction from a biological, this is how I'm going to continue fathering. Because even though sort of way back when it was, let's spread the seed and get as much of my lineage out there, over time, I think what's happened is they realise this is going to work because we need to look after our women and our children and support them long term.
But we are historically built for female communities of looking after kids and things, so that's only really something fairly recent. I mean, you get it still in America. You have a lot of polygamy where you have multiple wives bringing up groups of children together. You get it in Africa a lot now.
Yeah,
a lot of the time. So
I dig it. I think it's
new.
wicked. I think it's a great idea. I think raising kids
it's
is
supposed
so
to be
hard.
really good for children to be a part of that situation, and we kind of have it at home a bit with grandparents, but a lot of people don't have that even, do they? And I think it's hard raising kids. Get as many people involved in it as possible, especially if they're not me.
I think
raising my kids.
I think that makes me think though that
gives you time.
I think the whole thing around polyamory, and then to a slightly lesser intense thing with swinging and things like that, is it's just a way to live outside of the box. And we always talk about this both on the podcast and individually, just chatting, that people are put into boxes too quickly and too accepting of that, and this is how you'll live your life and this is what you'll do. And
they're not necessarily happy boxes, though, are they?
no,
They're not boxes of happiness.
Don't get me wrong. I think some people are comfortable in that box because it provides a bit of a comfort blanket. But I think it's great that this is gaining traction and more people are discovering things and trying it for themselves. And even if it's not for them, they're giving it a go, and it gives people a chance to, even if it's just for a night, get outside of the box and live a little.
Yeah, so
try
like
different things.
Lawrence Josephs here says, we all need to develop self-compassion for our human limitations. Some of us, have certain personality dispositions and interpersonal skills like overcoming jealousy and insecurity about consensual partner sharing. And some of us that are monogamous at heart might have to accept that we just aren't that good at non-monogamy. And accepting who you are, whether that is I fit into the social stereotype of being monogamous or I don't, and I don't know how I feel about that. I think it is finding that compassion for your own limitations and for your own needs and wants, because they are, like you said, different, and being accepting of that, I think, is a good way forward. People who are securely attached, authentic and high in empathy with good communication skills tend to be better at monogamy than people who are insecurely attached, high in narcissism, fake and low in empathy with poor communication skills. So that's interesting. I think that might have something to do with the trust element, maybe. And there are even some more negative statistics around, I think I briefly mentioned, around open marriages, which have a little bit of a different outcome generally to open relationships themselves. So in European open marriages, the statistics show that CNN people are less satisfied with their sex life than people in monogamous relationships. 64% of women and 47% of men believe that open relationships isn't morally upright. 67% of female participants would leave their partners if the latter would like to have an open relationship, compared to 46% of males. So there's still quite a lot of taboo around it all.
I've read a whole argument about this recently on one of the groups, was saying that this person was saying, I'd like to try other things, and they were like, well, that's it, fine, end of.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's quite...
Such a fine line, isn't it? Whereas it's like, what about if we explore that and find out how we can both...
Yeah, I feel like that's a communication error rather than...
Yeah.
And that you've got to be able to discuss things rather than just hard no, done, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But not just a hard no, also a hard yes. If somebody has got, if person A wants to try something different, person B says hard no, or I'm not sure, person A, though, can still say, hard yes, I'm doing it anyway. It goes both ways, doesn't it? There's always got to be some room for compromise.
Yeah, yeah.
37.5% of respondents in partial open relationships admitted to heavy drinking and drug use. And I think maybe that's more to do with it being young people, party life, etc., etc. We're very relaxed
we drink
and
more
chill
when we go out.
Yeah.
I didn't drink at all until we started going out, because I found that I needed a little bit of loosening up.
Yeah. Liquid courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is outside of my social knowledge.
Yeah.
I've never, especially with the fact that women are more in the driving seat with swinging, especially, I've never been in the driving seat of my relationships in terms of meeting people and sort of things at parties and kicking things off like this. I've never been in the driving seat of that. So this is a complete 180 for me.
Yeah.
And I found that it was a bit anxiety inducing to start off with. And I needed a bit of liquid courage. Now I find it just sort of lubricates the conversation a bit better.
Yeah, I've never actually told you this, but one of my favourite things and it's not like we've been on a 10-year journey to swinging. We've only been doing it on and off for
just every year
or so. But is seeing the difference in your confidence as well when we're there. In that sort of the chat, the social phase before.
It's amazing what a pair of 8-inch heels will do for me.
8-inch heels and a few vodka and cranberries. But it's been really interesting just sort of for me to take a step back
being
sometimes
that person.
and watch.
Yeah.
Because you kind of do put a little bit of an alias on, isn't it?
Yeah.
For a night, you can be someone different for them.
I like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you like seeing me like that, because it feels lovely. And it's something that I've been trying to harness back in my everyday life as well. And I think it's helping to be more confident and helping to be more authentically me, I think, because you're fully filling your skin when you're doing those things that are what you feel like you should be, who you are. you're just fully you, and that's really nice feeling.
Yeah. I love
But
that.
we do drink more, definitely. And I see, especially you saying about relationship dissatisfaction, I think we'd hit a bit of a rut before we started this sexually. I mean, it wasn't that there was a problem with the relationship, but you do just sort of hit a bit of a rut
It was
sometimes.
a bit of a kickstart, didn't it?
And so it's, even though you're saying about, we would have reported dissatisfaction with our sex life before we started this. And we've kind of just sort of filled that void in by doing this.
Yeah.
But I could see that's...
But it's opened up lots of other boundaries as well, because like this podcast, I don't think we'd have got ourselves into the headspace where we wanted to talk about it
100%
so openly.
I absolutely wouldn't have done this. Just discovering that we don't actually have boundaries means that we are... Well, that we have very few of them. Means that we are much more open and that we are just grabbing life a bit more.
Yeah. And it's good that it's brought you that confidence in everyday life. I think that's so great as a step forward. So I'll just finish the negative stats, which I know you just talked about all the wonderful positives, but 37% of participants in open relationships in one survey contracted lifetime sexually transmitted infections. But obviously a lot of that is human error. The reality is that the dream often turns into dissonance and inequality. One spouse is likely to end up feeling that the other is getting better sex or a better partner. So there is that who's sort of
jealousy as well.
Yeah.
If there's any kind of nugget of jealousy in your relationship, it's going to expose it.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have to deal with it, or it's going to eat you, basically.
I think you have to be a certain type of person to be able to look past that. I'd really
I think
struggle personally.
we're not jealous kind of people, so we haven't encountered that. But I think if you're encountering it, you've got to know how to deal with it before you embark on something like this, or it's just going to get worse.
So it's interesting. So 20% of couples have experimented with consensual non-monogamy, but unfortunately open marriage has a 92% failure rate, and 80% of people in open marriages experience jealousy.
Marriage is hard, and
it seems that the jealousy is the breaking point of that.
I just thought so. But I mean, think even with us, I wouldn't want that kind of relationship, because I think I would get jealous.
Yeah.
But also, it's hard with one of you. With two of you in it, once you add an extra person, that's just going to become harder, and more people, more difficulty.
Yeah.
And you're trying to see something from someone else's point of view, trying to see something from two people's point of view that aren't necessarily the same as yours. Just seems impossible for me.
I do find the whole thing intriguing now, because you think of the dynamics of a relationship. You're with one other person. Over time, you can read each other. You can understand, even without talking about how that person's feeling. You've got another element of that, and I can see the positives of it, because there might be a day where you yourself are not feeling it. Just everyone has those days, doesn't it? Where you just can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered with life today. You've got someone else there that can occupy and entertain and socialise with the other person. But then that, again, it can breed jealousy and discontent, can't it?
That's like a distraction, I think. And that, like, you're my safe space. And if you had another person, they can't both be your safe space, I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Such a complex area, isn't it? It's also rules and setting boundaries, as you guys have said, is super important to how to navigate this. So some of the recommendations, which I'm sure you can add to, both partners should be into it. Don't badger the other one to be more into it. Sex clubs are a good start, and that's sort of what you guys have done. Talking about what exactly would you like to do? What can you tolerate your spouse doing? How would you feel if your lover has hotter sex with strangers than with you? What if? So being specific. So I'm okay with you kissing strangers, getting naked, touching and hand jobs, but not oral or intercourse. Or I don't mind you playing with others at clubs, but you come home with me, no sleepovers. Many CNMers insist on same room play to keep an eye on each other. Others feel comfortable with separate rooms or dates or overnights. Using safe words is another one to signal discomfort. For example, yellow light, red light. The former means I need a brief break to make sure we're both okay, and the latter means I need everything to stop now. And then communicating before, during, shortly after, and the morning after, checking in. Are you okay? Second thoughts? Want to play again? Anything you do differently? Just like you guys were saying about earlier.
We deconstruct every time we go out. I think we need to, because in the moment things happen that you haven't talked about.
Yeah.
You're like, am I okay with this? And you do check in with yourself whilst you're doing stuff, but you can't really check in with each other that well at the time.
Because there's so many other people, and
So we've met couples, we've made friends with couples who have very, very clear lines of what they will get involved in, what they won't. You talked about that. It's soft swap and full swap. So full swap is anything realistic goes, but you're probably in the same room. Soft swap is an evolution, a step on from heavy petting. But it's kissing, it's oral, but there's no penetrative sex, anything like that.
Yeah. Because
we've been a little bit more open with it, we're like, look, realistically, anything goes. There's nothing on that list other than an emotional thing of I'm going to go off with this person and I'll be back on Monday. That's where our boundary is. There has been times where things have happened, maybe because it's the first time one of us or either of us has ever experienced it before. So that deconstructing the next day is important. Say, do you know what? That actually really did it for me. That ticked all of my boxes. I like that. Whereas I'm not really that keen on that. And then for next time that even if you can see that developing for your partner, you can kind of step in and sort of steer it in a different direction.
Sure.
Also stops the jealousy.
Yeah.
Being able to talk about it as well.
There's been when jealousy, I think, is in different levels because it can be an all-consuming massive thing. But the last time we went to a club a few weeks ago, and you had a hot time, and I was a bit like,
left out.
I feel a bit left out. Yeah, I'm a bit jealous. I was already spent. I couldn't really join in as fully as I would have liked, but it wasn't like a bad jealousy. It was a little bit of envy, a little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But still like a high five. Well done. That was cool.
High five.
Well done.
Wow. Do you guys have anything more to say on rules and boundaries? Anything that you guys have that's? I mean, you said you're quite open.
The one thing I'd say is you said about STIs there is being a risk, and from our experience, I mean, it's always safe sex if you're involving someone else, and that's the rule in the clubs that we've been to. I assume it's the same at all clubs. But there are people we've seen it on websites. There are couples out there that don't insist upon that.
Right.
It's specifically go out for bareback type sessions.
Yeah,
and things.
there's people that do that, and there's obviously there's a group of people that enjoy that, and if that's what they want to do, fair play to them. But
they sort of bring it on themselves a little bit.
You would do, yeah. But from our perspective, that's probably our only real hard rule, isn't it?
We've got young children. We want to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes you hyper aware, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Kids. And for us, that's one of our things that we're very aware of, and that one of our boundaries that we don't push. But a lot of people have those boundaries in place.
Yeah, but we've never witnessed that in the clubs or anything. I think clubs is a really safe place to experiment with it and get used to it.
You can see, can't you, people who saying where one person's more into it than the other. You can see that sometimes in groups. You can see that sort of thing going on, and you can also see where, like I said, where someone's gone, decided they wanted to do something, and then usually it's beforehand. People have had second thoughts, but sometimes you get it sort of during play, and you can see that one person is like, "No, I'm not okay with this," and you can see that. But generally, people are quite respectful of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and be like, "Oh, this isn't, this person isn't okay."
Yeah,
and sort of police things. I found that in clubs there tends to be a lot more sort of policing that kind of thing.
Yeah, people look out for each other. I mean, the last time we went, there was a guy who was a little bit too pushy, a little bit too insistent, and he got told pretty firmly.
A few people were telling him off, weren't they?
Yeah, I lost my patience with him.
And I think that's a nice, safe environment to do that in.
Yeah, definitely. You can sort of trust the space then. Yeah.
I think one thing we haven't said is, what's your view on this?
What's my view on it? I don't know. I'm very open-minded. It's not something that I would feel comfortable practicing in my relationship because I'm painfully monogamous and boringly so. And
I think you said you think you'd get jealous before.
I would. I definitely would get jealous. I'm quite a jealous person. Not in a possessive way, but definitely if it was anything like that, I'd be I'd really struggle with it. But also find it a bit of a kick at the same time. It's very complicated. Like, it would be a kick that he was getting like interest from other women, you know?
So on the groups that I was looking at, it was always about women. Like, oh, it's derogatory to women and stuff, and that it's not, you know, that why shouldn't I be enough and stuff? But it never looked at it the other way, like that was some, you know, that is the woman getting used. I was like, well, sometimes we find, especially in the clubs, you were saying about it being female, but sort of oriented. There's an entire club night basically dedicated to women in couples finding another bloke, isn't there? And then actually the women in the driving seat on this, and we never really think of, actually sometimes the men are the ones that get used in this situation, and that's okay.
I can imagine that, yeah.
Both ways, you know, it's, if they're down with it, that's okay, and that you probably shouldn't be judging other people's motivations for things.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I think it is all about, our podcasts and our discussions are all about being open-minded and not having judgment about people's choices in their sex and relationships. And I think this is just one of those where it is sort of like learning about it and understanding and educating yourselves.
Yeah, and break the boundaries, you just might have a bit more fun.
Yeah. Well, it's been such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for listening. And please give us a review. Check us out on social media or on our website, www.coupled.com. We hope to see you again soon. And thank you for joining us on Sex It's Not That Deep.
Sex, it's not that deep.